So today we're in Calaveras Big Tree State Park. There are two groves here, the North Grove, which we are in, and the South Grove, which has the bigger trees, but it involves about a 10-mile round-trip snowshoe trip. And I don't have enough time in the day to do that. And the road, because the road's closed, normally you can drive to that. So that's the more isolated, desirable grove to me. This is the one all the tourists stop in, but it is beautiful. And there's lots of these guys. It's an impressive grove. They're not the biggest sequoias, but they are gorgeous. And any time spent here among any of these trees is time well spent. All right, today we are going to visit the biggest living trees in the world, which is the sequoia. I'm in Big Trees, Calaveras Big Trees State Park. These are babies compared to the biggest trees. This tree is maybe 1,000 years old, but it's an impressive grove. A lot of people are out today and touring these impressive trees. The biggest trees are in the Sequoia National Park, which makes sense since it's named after those trees. And the largest tree in the world by bulk is the General Sherman tree, and it's just massive. And what makes these trees so awesome is they have no taper. They're just wide all the way up. And there are taller trees, although some of these have been known to grow over 300 feet tall. It's the big giants like the Sherman tree and the Grant tree are around 250 feet tall, but their girth is just amazing. The General Grant tree, I think it's considered the third largest tree in the world. It is 91 feet around at breast height. Arborists and scientists consider diameter at breast height. So at my height, it would be up around here. So it's 91 feet around, but the Sherman tree, if you measure it from where it touches the soil, it is 102 feet around. So this is something, if you work with school children ever, I was lucky enough to run a tree station for a school event, and I had a group of 30 kids stretch hand to hand in a circle to try and make as big a circle as they could, and had them stretch, and we ran a wheel around, and they could only attain about 90 feet. So it gives a really good visual of how massive these trees really are. So 102 feet around. And the largest branch on the Sherman tree is 7 feet around, just the branch. So the trees get shaded out at the bottom, so they drop off. So the first branches tend to be way up in the tree. And that's a good thing for survival too. Those oldest trees are about 2,100 years old, so obviously, I think they can get up to about 2,500 years old, so obviously they need to be able to survive fire. This one has a burn. It's hollowed out a little bit, but this bark is just massive. It's full of tannins, which makes it resistant to any funguses and bugs. The bark can be up to 3 feet thick. So nothing can penetrate these trees, and they continuously grow. These trees never stop growing. So really excited to be here. Sequoia, just the name gives me goosebumps. Whenever I see a sequoia, I just get goosebumps. I was out on a fishing and camping trip this summer and came across one of the groves that I didn't even know about. We were up by Dinky Creek, and I think it's called the McKinley Grove, and we came around a corner in the sun, and there were giant sequoias. It's like, whoa! They only grow on the west slope of the Sierra, between about 5,000 and 7,000 feet are most of them. These trees only grow in isolated groves. There's only 54 recognized groves. Some are as small as one tree even. The northernmost grove happens to be pretty close to my house, about 40 miles away. It's only got 6 trees, 6 standing trees and 2 down trees. It's called the North Grove, the Big Trees Grove. It's out of Auburn, California. And nobody goes there. I love to go just hang out in that grove. It's beautiful. This is Calaveras Big Tree State Park. Very, very popular. So it's overrun with people, but I love the parks because kids can come out. People get educated on the trees and get excited about the trees. And I love to share about the trees, as you know. So these trees always grow in mixed forests. Got some incense cedar growing around here, and some Doug fir. I see some ponderosa pines, and it's a mixed forest. Now, this is the leaf of these giant sequoias. It's a spiraled leaf. They're kind of prickly. One year I made the mistake of, they grow them in tree farms sometimes. They're perfectly conical when they're younger. And they just have a great shape, but they're very pokey. They wasn't a good tree, but they're beautiful when young too, before they grow into these just monsters. And the cones are very small. That's a cone from one of these trees. Now, a tree that grows and lives this long really doesn't need to produce a lot of seeds. One cone is enough because they have a lifespan of over 2,000 years. But these trees grow these cones, and they usually stay green and on the tree for up to 20 years before they open. And they depend on fire. So what happens, these mixed conifer forests, everything's cleared out, then the cones drop and open, and they disperse their seeds. 200 seeds per cone, and a tree can have 11,000 cones. So they make sure they survive. But they germinate in the ash of a forest fire. So forest management is important. I'll briefly mention climate change. Considering their limited range, they are going to be sensitive to temperature changes, so that's a huge concern for these trees. So the early white settlers did try to exploit these trees and cut them down. There's a tree called the bull tree, which is one of the largest sequoias in the world. It's in Sequoia National Park. It was probably the most extensive sequoia grove in the world at that time, but it was logged over, and they left this one specimen. I've been there, and it's kind of sad. It's a cleared off area, and there's just one giant tree, the bull tree. So if you ever get up there, check it out if you want to get a nice isolated area and see the story of the trees. But what saved these trees is their brittle wood. We're typically, when you fell a tree this big, when it falls, the wood was so brittle, it would break apart. And transporting these huge trees was a problem. So they were kind of saved by just their characteristics of being very brittle. So another thing man had to do in their conquest over nature is dig holes through these trees. There's some famous trees where we carved holes through the trees so we could drive our cars or horses through the trees, and it attracted a lot of tourists. Now in the early days, that was probably a good thing because the awareness probably helped save the trees. So there was a tree here that was the last living tunnel tree of the sequoias. It fell 2 years ago. So there are other trees. There was, I think, 5 altogether. There's one there, probably the most famous one was in the Mariposa Grove in Yosemite, called the Wawona tree. That one was quite famous. That fell in 1969. There's still one standing that's a dead tree in the Tuolumne Grove in Yosemite. And I'm an old guy. The road used to be able to take an access road through there. And whenever we went up to Yosemite a lot, whenever we were coming through there, we'd always take this access road. Even when it was farther, I wanted to visit my giant friends. And I couldn't resist the novelty of driving through that tree. So it was pretty cool. But if you really want to drive through a giant tree, the close cousin, these are Sequoia dendron gigantea. They have a cousin, which is the Sequoia sempervirens, and those trees are coastal redwoods, not the same tree. Some people confuse those trees. They also attain a great girth, and they're the tallest trees in the world, and they grow all over here in California in the coastal ranges. And there are, I think, 3 operating trees on private property with that you can still drive through a tree, but they don't maintain their girth as far up. That kind of makes them different than these giant sequoias. So they're not only the most giant trees in the world, the sequoia dendron, they are the 3rd oldest trees in the world. The oldest being the bristlecone pines, which grow over 5,000 years old, so twice as old as these giants behind me. So, pretty interesting place. If you ever come by a place with sequoias, I highly recommend walking through and getting off the beaten path and just looking up into the canopy and enjoying just an amazing spectacle. Just the size of these trees is amazing. And see if you get goosebumps like I do. So I'm standing on the stump of what's called the Discovery Tree, and this was probably the first tree that was publicized and discovered by white people. The Miwoks, the indigenous people, managed to live among these trees for tens of thousands of years, and the first white man that came across this tree was in 1852. A guy named Obel was out hunting a grizzly bear, chasing down a wounded bear, and he came across this tree. And so nobody believed the size of this tree. So what did white people do? What they usually do? They decided to cut it down and show the rest of the world. So this tree was cut down. A saloon was built on this site, a dance hall. They shipped it to New York and put it on display. And you know, the gold rush and these trees being logged was destroyed a lot of the trees, but that was the first introduction to the rest of the world of these gigantic, monstrous trees. The first were probably spotted in Tuolumne, the Tuolumne Grove in Yosemite in 1833. But this was the first one that went worldwide, and this is the result, a big stump. Still amazing, but kind of sad that this magnificent tree was cut down. You'll be in my movie of an example of what people aren't supposed to do. Exactly. Leave the trail.